sound. Wonderful. So I'm going to wait a few minutes to let people start coming in. Hey, Garrett, welcome.
Thank you.
Hi.
Howard, hello.
Heather.
Hello.
Mika.
Lovely.
Lustig. Ah, Bikini. Und
Hi there. Nice.
Hi. Ah, hallo. Hallo Petra.
hallo. Hallo Heidi.
Hallo.
And there's Fauzi and Hanif. Welcome. All right. So I want to wait a couple minutes to let people come in. We were going to offer Spanish interpretation. I want to make sure I can make an announcement about that. So far, though, does anyone here? Oh, ¿Hay alguien que se habla español aquí o no? ¿Sí? ¿Más que inglés? Oh, of course. Well, actually, can Miranda also do German? No? Okay. Because I know we have a few German speakers right now, but I'm not sure.
Adrian, I may not have heard you correctly. Sonia and I only speak English, unfortunately, so
Okay, we'll keep it.
if there's translation, it'd be appreciated. But if we're the only ones, then that's fine.
Okay. Well, I think the presentation.
We'll speak in English.
Yeah.
It's going to be in English.
Oh, it's going to be in
Okay,
English.
right.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I can translate to British English or American, but that would be a bit difficult.
Well, I think it's got to be British.
Okay.
Well, actually, Scottish.
Scottish
preferably.
English.
Yeah.
Nice. Oh, Elizabeth. Yeah. Okay. Great. So, Miranda, if you can live translate for me, so we can go ahead and get started. So this presentation will be offered in Spanish with Spanish interpretation. So in order, I will start that right now. So in just a moment, if you click the globe down at the bottom of your Zoom screen, then you should hear Spanish interpretation.
Esta presentación también tendrá en español. Tenemos un intérprete, que soy yo, para español. Si es que quieren poner en abajo en la pantalla, hay un globo. Si es que quieren aplastar ahí y escoger el idioma que quieren escuchar. Sigan nomás.
Okay, great. Well, I am so glad that all of you could make it to our first C presentation panel on the Wild Pedagogical Approach. I'm looking forward to it. I think we're going to learn a lot. We have time for a presentation, about 45 minutes for question and answer. But before we begin, as this is a stupid event, I'd like to propose a moment of quiet, just for one moment. So if you would please just turn off your camera and sit quietly, and then we will begin.
Was I could or Spanish or Portuguese?
right. So we are very fortunate to have our talk today from Danica and Leonardo Wild. I'm going to give an introduction to them, a little bio, so you can get to know a little bit about them before they begin the presentation, but a little bit about format. So it can be difficult with online settings in order to manage a question and answer, and I know a lot of questions start coming up as we're listening to a presentation. So I'd like to take advantage of the chat. And if you have a question at any point during the presentation or during the question and answer period, please go ahead and type it directly into the chat. You can access the chat by clicking on the little speech bubble that's in the bottom bar of your Zoom screen. And that way we'll have a collection of all the questions that people want to ask. When it's time for the Q&A, we'll use the chat in order to draw out questions that haven't been answered yet. And then once the actual presentation is over and our time is up, we can actually keep those questions because I'll have the actual file with all the chat questions. And maybe we can actually type up and respond to you with answers to those questions in the future as well, so that the conversation can keep going. So that's our method of trying to hear all voices. I know sometimes only a few people get heard when we're in large groups like this. So please, the chat is going to be our friend. Is there any questions about that? Does that make sense to everybody? Good. Okay, great. So here we are. So some brief bios on Danica and Leonardo. Danica is originally from Scotland and has been a SUBID member since 1990 and a helper since 1995. Living in Edinburgh and Aberdeen, she studied recreational management and then a postgraduate certification in primary education. On 2 separate occasions, 2 SUBID sisters lent her the book Education for Being by Rebecca Wild, and a seed was sown. Danica began exploring more about alternative education, and after a stint in supply teaching, had earned enough money to travel to visit Petzolazzi Experimental School in Ecuador. She accompanied youngsters from the Pesta on a 6,000-kilometer bike trip from Quito to Manaus. Soon after, Danica married Leonardo Wild, and together they have raised 3 children, as respectfully and non-directively as they could. Danica participated for 10 years in a small project of the Petzolazzi Foundation called CEPAS, Centers for Autonomous Activities, based on the Wild Pedagogical Approach, which was parent-accompanied rather than with paid teachers. In 2018, Danica became the National Susiladharma representative with 2 others and became a member of C with a wish to share the relevance of non-directive learning for authentic development, guided by the inner and actualization of our true human potential. Leonardo is the son of the founders of the Petzolazzi School in Ecuador, Mauricio and Rebecca Wild. Besides numerous jobs and adventures like sailing the Pacific and Atlantic Ocean, crossing the Andes on foot with native Indians 3 times, and participating in the Pesta's Manaus trip, he has given around 160 conferences in Europe, Japan, Indonesia, the US, and South America, has published 11 books, both fiction and nonfiction, in Spanish, English, and German, and around 200 articles for magazines, as well as 50 produced scripts. He is the president and co-owner of 2 companies offering various breakthrough technologies for environmental protection, remediation, as well as health-related products like Iridium Blue Water and Arc Living Minerals. Some of his conferences and workshops have been on education, including the Virendra Vatachi Educating for a Human Future conferences in Jakarta and Innsbruck. He's been the keynote speaker for the Active Learning for Engineering Education in Barcelona in 2009, the Mexican International Conference on New Paradigms of Science in Education, and in 2019, he was part of the UNICEF Diners Eduapasionados research group to find new models on how to change education in Ecuador. So without further ado, Leonardo and Danica Wild.
Thank you. Hello, everybody.
Yes, hello to everybody.
they can hear.
Yeah, can you hear us okay? All good.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think just to quickly mention that the Wild Pedagogical Approach comes from Rebecca and Mauricio, Leonardo's parents. It's not our personal approach, although it is in many ways, but it's not something that comes from us. We're just using it. So thanks for that. So I think I'd like to maybe just tell you how I discovered the Pestalozzi. As Hadrian mentioned, I was given the book, I read the book. It was during the time when I was studying about education, and I had already been studying recreation, and I found that in recreational pursuits, I could see that a lot of the needs were being met in the types of activities where there was a lot of self-direction, respect for the person, and the ability to be autonomous. So when I looked into traditional education, I became disappointed, disgruntled that the needs of children in those school environments did not seem to be being met at all. And it's something that's been going on for a long time. And it's since that first discovery of the Pestalozzi, I don't think that many things out there in the world of education have changed that much. It seems to be a system that's outdated. So when I arrived at the Pestalozzi here in Ecuador, I wanted to feel what it was really like to be in this autonomous environment where children were self-directed and respected by the adults in the environment. After having read the book, I had to feel it for myself, because I was planning to go back and start working in the Lewis New School, which was at the very, very beginning in Lewis in England with Adrian Campbell. So my life changed dramatically. I never did go to that school because I met Leonardo here, and we married and began this great adventure together with our own children, and having the amazing support from Rebecca and Mauricio in what we were doing with our own children. So I also valued very much that Rebecca, although she probably had many things to say to us as we were discovering this relationship with our own children, and this respect, this communication, feel their own autonomy, their own, and making their own decisions. She didn't step in when many times maybe another mother-in-law might have. She let us feel many things out for ourselves. And then when we ourselves had those questions, we would go to her and ask, how can you give us a little bit of a hand with some of these questions that we have, seeing how our children are growing up and developing. So, Leo, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, well, I was, I think 1 year old when I was told, I can't remember that, but my parents got a lot of Montessori materials, and they say that I was actually more interested in the wrapping paper at that age. So I prefer that than materials themselves. My mother created a small kindergarten in Colombia when I was 4 years old, where I was playing. And so I was actually introduced very early on to this type of education. But then, of course, I had to go to regular school. We were in a farm through a project with the Helmer brothers and Adam Albright in Tabacundo. And so I actually went to the regular school, but when I was 12 years old and my parents created a Pestalozzi, they said that if I don't want to, I don't have to go to school anymore. So I left school. But after a year and a half of being out of school, I realized the world was empty of children, because all of them are interned in all these institutions called schools. And there were no children out there to play with, except for weekends with the neighbors, perhaps. So my cousins came back from the north, from Cayambe, to another school in Quito. So I went back to school for a couple of years. But then I decided to go out again. And so basically I have left school, come back and gone out again, because it wasn't really for me, and everything else basically is more like self-taught. Just as a quick background.
Okay. So
So basically, one of the things we thought, because we don't know the background of any of you and how much you know about the different types of education, and I think it's something that can be quite interesting here to get a bit of a context in where does this pedagogical approach come into play, and perhaps why. Danica is going to sort of read out and give you the experience of what it is to be in a school, to read out some text that somebody else wrote. We didn't write that. And just to give this framework of what the educational methods are, and then we can go directly and dive into the Pestalozzi approach. If you all agree to that, I'll take it as a yes, all silence. So I will put the PowerPoint presentation from which Danica will read, so you can go read with her if you want to. And I'll share the screen here, and we can continue. Let me just see how the share screen goes, and goes here, share, and I will put the PowerPoint on. Where is it? It's strange.
just click on the
there,
next one.
here, there. Okay.
Just click over. So formal education is the one that works under the framework by individual boards of education. The orderly learning environment includes educational institutions, classrooms, specially trained teachers, teaching equipment, extracurricular activities, competitions, examinations, and a curriculum or syllabus. This is where the teacher imparts the knowledge and the student receives knowledge.
Wasn't he going through? Yeah.
Formal education is followed in schools, colleges, and other courses that follow a specific type of coursework. Some of its characteristics are as follows. A proper chronologically designed structure based on the hierarchy is followed. Syllabus and books are assigned correctly. The schedule is maintained and followed. Regular exams and tests are conducted. So informal education is the type of knowledge that one gains through several life experiences. This knowledge can be the one that we obtain from our parents and elders in our community. Individual necessary skills of life that are important for survival and sustenance comes under this category. It does not contain the theoretical knowledge of books. Informal education, the teachers of informal education are experiences. Some place homeschooling under this umbrella, but that will depend on the process of acquiring knowledge. If it follows an official curriculum and traditional teaching methods, the home environment replaces the classroom and it continues being formal education. Informal education is free from the various rules, regulations, and restrictions. It is devoid of the various schooling formalities such as following a schedule, carrying the necessary school items, and a uniform dress code. There are no exams and no complicated curriculum is followed. Non-formal education is one that is framed according to the requirement of a particular job. This type of training is not considered as a necessity, but more of a skill. Such a kind of education caters in part to the needs of an industry or personal growth programs. These can be about fitness programs, Boy Scout training, or software learning, etc. Non-formal education the flexible courses as per the capabilities of the individuals. Schedules and exams are not a necessity. Helps in developing specialized skills in an individual. Diploma, degree, awards, etc. are not expected as the end result. In alternative education, there are different types. There are many different types. There's Steiner, Waldorf schools, Sudbury Valley School, Montessori schools. You have Schumacher, small schools. You have, not anymore, but the summer school. Some homeschool umbrella organizations, the West River Academy in Colorado. There are state alternative education establishments or approaches for children with different needs and challenges, or to finalize high school without having gone through formal education, etc. Alternative education being the Pestalozzi, experimental school of 9 years without grades, age group teaching environments. So the Pestalozzi had the title of being an experimental school of those 9 years without grades. So some people thought that the Pestalozzi school in Ecuador was just a Montessori school or a school based on the precepts of the Swiss educational reformer Johann Heinrich Pestalozzi. The Pestalozzi was just a name given at the very last moment during the legal registration process because the other name that they wanted had already been taken. And the Pestalozzi was familiarly known as the Pesta. So
I can go back.
yeah. So
Yeah. So I don't know if you experienced that. It's a bit boring. This is what children get all the time. They get read stuff out, or a teacher talks to them. And it's, yeah, it may be all true or maybe not, but this is something that is there. Going back, the idea of formal education versus all different types of education creates a bit of like a landscape of educational methods. And in this case, the Pestalozzi, you could say it is an alternative educational method, but has other considerations than what other alternative schools have as well. You wanted to, should we go into the autopoiesis?
yeah, okay.
So just so you get a bit of an idea, I'm going to show you a slide here so you have a visualization of this. Let me see, where is it here? And the concept of autopoiesis is basically what differentiates the Pestalozzi or my parents, the Wild Pedagogical Approach from most other schools. And it all boils down to one of the main aspects, which is a thing of the autopoiesis. I don't know if you know what it is. Imagine a cell with, that is the membrane, inside is the interior of the cell, and the exterior of the cell is the environment outside of the cell. But the cell is what decides what comes in and what goes out. And this is basically, this image can help a lot to understand what the difference is between other methodologies and what my parents over time began discovering. It's not something that they came up with out of the blue overnight. It happened over the different years. So I don't know if anybody's familiar with Humberto Maturana's investigations on autopoiesis, which means making yourself, and what he called the structure of life. You know, the structure of life, what makes life different from non-life. It's not about children, it's about life. And so the idea here is that when you have a cell, and we are sort of like an extension of a cell in our structure, we have an interior, which is complex. We have a membrane, which is the skin, our eyes, our ears, and we interact with the environment. And usually in life, what happens is that the exterior can be dangerous to the interior, especially in the early days of evolution. when the cell wasn't as immersed in the sea, where things could actually damage it, it created this membrane. And you can see in different types of biology, animals that have actually a very hard shell, turtles. You have different other animals with a lot of fur to get protect themselves from the cold, etc., etc. So this visualization of this membrane and this interior that decides, I'm going to take this into me. It is my decision. It's a bit like when we do the latte hand, you know, it's not somebody outside telling me, do this movement now or whatever. You feel it from within. It's this life force as well, which is actually at the core of the whole understanding of the Wild pedagogical method. So if society tells us in a regular curriculum, now it's time to learn math, and an hour later some bell rings and now it's time to learn language, or and so forth, the environment is basically starting to impose on the interior of children. And this basically, we could say, goes against the actual structure of how life is supposed to work. The question is, why did it happen? Why is this going on at the moment? Why are we so intelligent that we put children in a barren environment full of chairs, walls, a teacher in front, telling them, like we said a moment ago, this is what you have to learn now. Basically, it comes from a historical aspect of education where over time, especially since the Industrial Revolution, humans had to be adapted to the machine, to getting trained to obey, getting trained to accept orders and follow a timeline, and simply not think really that much to be able to make the machine work. But this became institutionalized because of the needs of the industry and the economy. And now we see that has gone into basically most educational systems, right? But then even alternative education systems, they still have the structure where from the outside, in many cases, the curriculum or whatever topics are imparted into, as it were, the children. So this is the core idea of understanding the PESTA or the Wild pedagogical methodology, is to realize that in order for children to be able to acquire what they need to grow as human beings, it has to be in the environment, but they have to choose what they want to do, right? And we will show you later a few slides on how those environments would look like if you haven't seen one. But understanding this core aspect, again, it's key, right? You're arguing, oh, the curriculum, let's change the curriculum, let's change the topics, let's see. The information is happening so fast nowadays that there is more and more information, more and more knowledge, how do we get all of that into us? But we are not knowledge churning machines or absorbing machines. We are human beings. We are living systems where the structure of life continues being the same as millions of years ago with the cell. This is something very, very basic. So I don't know if you want to say something about that. Just to introduce you to this, so how do we know what a child needs in the environment? That will actually depend on the stage of development. Again, for human beings, we are so complex that it's not as simple as a cell that is there and needs certain things and gets rid of other things and that's it. In human beings, we go through stages of development, which are also called sensitive stages of development, where when we are from 0 to 2 years old, we have a different motor sensory affective need than an adult or somebody who's mature, or a child that is between 3 and 7. or a child between 7 and 14. So this is more like what Danica can now tell you a bit more about how those environments look like in relation to the stages of development that have to be respected, and the child given the means to acquire those things, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, Rebecca and Mauricio began their kindergarten with Montessori materials. Rebecca studied a course in Montessori. So it's to basically provide an environment where the child is the active learner, that the child is a little scientist, that the child is always investigating, and to make sure that the environment that the child is in will be an environment which will satisfy those needs as the child is developing. So if you think about Jean Piaget, everybody knows the developmental stages of 0 to 2 or 3, being sensory motor, from 3-ish on to 6 or 7, where you have pre-operational. When you go on, you have the next, which is concrete operational up until about 12, 13. And then from there, you have 13, 14 onwards, where you have a more formal operational development. So, I mean, these stages are huge. So what we're looking at as well are individual children who have their own individual needs based on their stages of development, but also what they have within them in their own families, in all their own experiences, as well as those inner needs, which are what we want to be trying to satisfy with prepared environments and accompanying adults or teachers who are respectful to those needs. So, for instance, in the kindergarten of the Pestalozzi, and I remember when I first arrived there and I went into an environment, and when you're visiting an environment like this, it's very important not to be a tall, big adult walking around looking, it's to go in and feel very much to be aware of what's going on and just keep very sort of quiet and observe, so that the children continue to feel that they're being respected, that their respectful environment is still there and it's always going to be there. And that's one of the conditions provided by the adults in that environment. So I saw children in a variety of different areas making their decisions autonomously and taking those actions, preparing salad with proper knives, in a little group, talking about what they were doing, and the accompanying adult being there, watching, maintaining a safe environment. Because if another child was to want to push a child, that would be the role of the adult in the environment, to perhaps say in a non-directive way, but remind the child that we don't push here in the Pesta, and not to say, no, don't do that. So this is I'm starting to sort of talk about this, the idea of directive and non-directive within this respectful environment. So moving through the kindergarten, I remember there's areas for constructive play with blocks. There's an enormous variety of different types of materials, because it's with these practical experiences of doing things that the child is making sense of the world. So everything that it touches, a wooden block, a plastic block, a material block, all of these things have qualities within them, so that the child is able to sort of accommodate and adapt and bring in all of these new experiences into themselves and into the way that they function in the world. So moving through, there are children who are doing art, they're painting, they're drawing, they're gluing, they're making, this is all, a lot of unstructured play and materials. And then there are the structured materials, which are also a lot of Montessori, where the children are able to take out pieces of wood which have an order to them, and so they're putting them into order, they're mixing them up, they're putting them in order, but maybe it's not in order, and then the child becomes aware. And so through this error, which is, it's just the process of discovery, that's where the child is making all of these new inner order for themselves as well in this world. So the teacher's role here as well, or the accompanying adult, as we were in the SEPAs, is to maintain the environment in a relaxed and prepared way, so that the children are always feeling that there's an adult around, but that the adult is not imposing or intervening or certainly not telling a child what to do, but observing how the child is going about what they're doing, what it is that they're doing, what did they do yesterday and what are they doing today, and then what progress are they making to do next week. So within this prepared environment, where the child initially comes into the environment and basically just chooses what they want to do, they'll go around looking, feeling out, and then something will just spark and they'll be like, right, I'm going to do this. So that sort of happens for the beginning of the morning. And then there's a certain structure to the day as well. There was in the PESTA, there was in the SEPA. So there's maybe a snack, so everybody gets together and they can eat together. And then after that, there are certain offers as well that are available from the adults. So without bells and buzzers, but just with this quality of the voice. So you're talking to the children or singing. It's the music hour. So there's a small allotted time, maybe 20 minutes, depending on the attention span of the children. And this is an offer. It's from the adult. So the adult will make a few instruments, sound, maybe sing some songs. Maybe it will incorporate a bit of dancing, so a bit of movement to go with it. So it depends as well on how it's going, what the children are feeling. But it has its order as well. The children can decide, oh yeah, today I think I want to go and do music. So they'll go and they'll try it out. A lot of children at the beginning, they'll just kind of watch, because they're internalizing, they're taking all of this in, and until the point where they're actually ready themselves to go, I'm going to go and pick up that little drum and do that with everybody here. Not this conscious thought, obviously, that I'm talking about, but that's this inner decision where the children are making their autonomous decisions based on those needs. So then throughout the day, the morning, we go on to, there's an offer of a project. So an adult might show some kind of a handicraft that they've come up with, some printing or whatever. And it's not to say, okay, I'm doing it, do it like this, we do this, but to show and verbalize through a non-directive language that I do it like this. This is what I'm doing. I'm putting the glue on here now, I'm putting the paper. And the child, because the child is in that sensitive stage as well, it's ready to do and to imitate many things. So the child will just start seeing what you're doing, and then they will start doing the same thing. And that is the way that children will learn. They're always watching, looking to see what's going on around them, taking it in, every single thing that we say and do, and our facial gestures. A child is a sponge because they are making sense of the world around them. So then there's a story time. The story will be a story that's told. It's not read from a book, because it comes out in a way which has a lot more feeling, and it comes from within the adult. So this human contact as well that we really need, so that the presence of an adult in the environment is an authentic presence, where the adult is feeling as well, how are these children? How is this child that I'm sitting with? And this, you know, many people say that in their work as teachers, that we are lucky, we can connect with children because we have the Latihan. And I think that that is very true, but I also think that where you have a respectful environment for children to be in, that this guiding a respected principle that they're going on is, and that the intention of the adult to connect with that, to feel how, you know, what is this child needing at this time? When, if a child starts to cry, if it maybe starts just talking away, where you think, well, yeah, there's something going on here. So it's this always being aware and trying to maintain this human connection as well to, you know, with the child. So, you know, those are the kind of, that's the kind of structure part of there, but it's open to a child to say yes or no to want to do it. So there's also, in the Pestalozzi, there was the primary. It was a very large primary, a lot of kids in there. So there's a lot of different stages of development. So the children are doing a lot more things on their own, or with maybe with a friend, with a bunch of friends. They're outside playing. There's a whole variety of different play equipment with ropes and tires and trees and water streams. So this is also to have a really full environment, full of different possibilities for different types of experiences. Then within, you have the structured environment for math, for language, for science, for all of these things. So it's not that there isn't, we wouldn't say that there was an actual curriculum, but everything that's there in the materials, it's like there's an implicit curriculum. There are activities for children to be doing to enable them to make those connections between language and objects, to be able to experiment and to really be this active learner within all of these possibilities that exist. Another thing, looking quickly on to, because the time is really flying by, going into the secondary as well. So you have children in the secondary who are 12 to 13 years of age. From then onwards, they are also, Rebecca and Mauricio saw the need to create a totally new type of environment for those children when they first started with children of secondary school age, because their needs were once again distinct. So they were looking for more areas to be talking to their friends, and just there was so much to talk about in the world to make sense. Well, how do you feel about this? This is what I feel about this. And then with an adult as well, a respectful adult who's there sort of listening to all of this in this process of the children in this discovery of who am I in this world. And in that, the children go on to start learning another language because they're ready to deal with that kind of thing. They're more autonomous in groups. They go out to do work experience, maybe at a vet's for 3 days a week, or to a bakery. So they have their work experience. What do adults do? And then, well, what would it mean if I was doing that? So it's all experiential. And then there's a lot of reflection, and there's a lot of talk with those adults. There were also every Monday there would be an assembly, a meeting, where a lot of the things that were going to happen, some activities, some trips, would be talked about, so that people know what's going on in the week. And then there's also an opportunity for children to say what they're happy or not happy with. Were there rules that perhaps were not being adhered to? And the children themselves would say, well, you know, a child has consistently not put things back in the place that it's supposed to be. So what's the consequence going to be of that type of thing? So it's also this self-directed approach within the environment itself, with the teachers accompanying to maintain the presence and the interaction when it's necessary and needed from the adult accompanying. I think that's all
So one of the things here about all of this is that if we see what we mentioned before of this structure, the inner decision that makes the child choose things from the environment has to be very rich in all sorts of possibilities to interact depending on their development stage. So younger children have a different environment in terms of even in what we call math, for example. They're sticks and they're more raw, they're bigger. But as they progress into the, as they call secondary or older ages, there are different levels of abstractions in materials themselves. For example, a blue bead will represent a 10, a green one will represent a 1, and a red one will represent 100. That's a level of abstraction, because abstraction starts happening, or we have a capacity to abstract realities as our cerebral cortex develops. And this is one of the key things about the whole Wild Pedagogical Approach, is to understand and respect the neurobiological development of, in this case, children. What does it mean? They have discovered that, for example, the Arnold J. Kornhuber studies on motor readiness potential, that if decisions to do a motor action comes from within, something happens in the brain, which is called the myelinization of the dendrites that make the decision is made, and the dendrites, neurons get coated with myelin. And if the decision comes from without, do this, this doesn't happen as much. Myelinization is more directed to, okay, listening, obeying, and doing it. So you're getting programmed to obey rather than programmed to decide. Decisions are, by definition, something that comes from within. The oxymoron of autonomous decisions, as it were, to a degree, is like, okay, you are volunteers now, do this. No, that's not a decision that you made. And in this quality of learning, that's why also I say that teaching, people believe, is the other side of the coin of learning, but neurologically, that's not the case. Teaching in the formal methodology, in what we see in the world, is from without, saying this is good for you, you have to learn this at this time. The quality of the person, of the teacher, can have an influence in not making it as raw, as can I say it, as aggressive to a degree in relation to life processes, right? But the system itself, the system of saying, okay, you are going to learn this now, this is what you have to know. It's more critical at a younger age, perhaps, than at an older age, because at an older, when we can abstract, we have already a membrane that we can say, I'm not going to do this, or I just do it because I have to, but this is not me. But children that are younger cannot really see that, right? So again, this leads to the whole concept of directivity versus non-directivity, which is based on this idea of decisions that come from within. If from without, you're telling them what to do this, right? Or you do mathematical operations in this way, or this is how you do the square root in a material. If you tell a child that, you're being directive. However, if you say, this is how I do a square root in a material, you're not telling the child to do anything, but they will then try to imitate. You're actually just saying, I'm part of the environment, not in those words, but I am part of the environment, and I'll do this way. And by imitation, by looking, by feeling, the child will learn without being taught, without being told what to do, right? And this is, 45 minutes to talk about this, very little after all these years of all the different nuances that come with all of this. But this is basically what we tried to, with Danica, we spoke. So what is the essence of what we want to say about the Wild Pedagogical Approach? And I think that we could probably have other more, other talks if people are interested, perhaps. But for us, this understanding of, okay, people say, okay, if you don't tell a child what to do, how can you make sure the environment is not a chaos, you know? But this is, again, this is the role of the adult, like Danica said, to keep the environment safe from active dangers, and to keep the environment in an orderly fashion, because this order for the world is going to be drawn in through the interaction with as children play with things and do things. There's an aspect of limits. Limits are not something that is being directed. A limit would be we do not hit in this environment, or physically to say you can't hit this child, but you don't tell go play there. It's the next step. It's usually don't hit somebody, or don't do this, do that. No, this do that aspect is left out, right? This is the limit, and then the child will decide what next to do. I mean, it's very complex to a degree for if it's the first time you hear about this, but I don't know. What we can do too is we can, should we show some of the photographs of the environment?
Because it's already 5 to 9.
So we can show you a few slides just for those who have never seen something like this. Let me just, we talked about this, and I'm passing them. So this is an environment that you will find in most regular schools, with some exceptions perhaps, but it's it's an environment where you guys know this, I don't have to tell you. And what do children want to do there? They look out the window, right? But this is where the Pesta looked like when it was still here, before 2005. So you can see it's full of materials, full of things to do on the sides and materials, and you can take those materials to the tables, right? This is a photograph of some of the materials for doing mathematics. You can see on the right here the stick. The stick represents the 10, and then you have other to this one here is the 100. This is the 1,000. So physically you can feel the math, right? And then of course you have other motor sensory things, water, playing, which is really important to get the qualities of the world: water, sand, wood, rocks. This is a picture of my mother and Miranda and Sebastian when they were still quite young. And so that you see my mother was actually down at the level of the children. This is another thing. If you are big, you are somebody who is up there, and you have to sort of go to the level of children so they don't feel threatened by your size. This is basically a very quick overview of what the Wild Pedagogical Method was. I think we can go now to questions. You have to say something else?
No, questions and answers. So
I don't know if anybody has specific questions. There are none in the chat, so you guys can, Adrian.
Yeah, no problem. Well, thank you so much. I have several questions, and I want to go ahead. So what I did is I started typing them in the chat, and I didn't want to send them during the presentation to distract. But if anyone does, we're trying something out here, and it's sort of like a live stream, if anyone has watched those before, where the questions appear and the presenters can filter through them. And again, our hope is that by using the chat, it's an opportunity to hear all voices better, and an opportunity to respond to some questions now and hopefully other questions in the future too. So here's one from me, and if anyone else wants to insert questions too, now is the time to do so. To access the chat, again, there's a little bubble in the bottom of your Zoom screen that says chat. Just click it, type in your question, and press enter.
Yeah. So I can see the question here. Christina had a question too. She raised a hand. I can answer that question in a moment, Adrian. Christina, Come up.
Christiana. Yeah.
Christiane, sorry.
I was a preschool teacher in a public school in New Jersey in the States. And we did a lot of, and were encouraged to engage in a lot of the approaches that you were through the high scope learning model. However, since we were a Title I program, which basically means we got extra funding because it was a poorer community that we were in, the requirements to collect data and to pinpoint specific skills in the 3- and 4-year-olds that we were given to teach became so oppressive, even though the approach was very much like what you spoke of. The funding for teaching was very much tied to the results that we got and the data that we were able to provide. So for me as an educator, it felt like a war between, achieving my goals to make sure that I had a job the following year while being totally opposite and non-directive and encouraging exploration with the children, and working with teacher aides who, with early childhood, you really need a lot of caring adults who are more concerned with the children's needs than their needs to be on their phones or going to the bathroom, socializing, etc. So I'm just wondering, if you all have had any success in terms of funding, or is what you're doing totally a private parent tuition paid situation, or how have you been able to influence state funded schooling situations?
Yeah, well, one thing that you have to understand, that the Pestalozzi school, experimental school, was closed down in 2005 for various reasons. So that's not happening anymore. One of them was the increased difficulty to fund. It was a private school, right? Tuition was paid, but it was done in such a way that about only 30% of the parents were paying the full tuition, and it went down according to the parents' capacity to pay, which made it really difficult, right? It wasn't a public school. Then the CEPAs up where our children were, it was basically the foundation. We had all those environments up there, but the parents had to, they were the ones who were present. There were no teachers being paid. So it was no issue of having somebody trying to make a livelihood of being with children, which is what a teacher does, right? What other issues? The issue of funding and economy is, again, one of those big aspects nowadays. Why do people even go and want to get a degree? In many cases, they choose a degree according to what they're going to earn from that. So this aspect of the paradigm of education is very intimately tied to the paradigm of the economic system, which is, again, has a similar issues that like the educational methodology and systems, and what we did when they're going all the way to the industrial age and before, right? If you were a good carpenter, you could get more work than a carpenter who didn't have a good tutor. So this is a question that it has to do more with the economy of the education rather than the methodology of what is the actual core principles of how human beings learn. So I see there is I don't know if that answers your question, but I see that Hadrian said about the discomfort is toward challenges on discomfort. I mean, we are constantly, as human beings, as living organisms, facing these discomforts all the time. Nowadays, one of the discomforts, the one you said, Christiane, about I need the money to live. It's a discomfort. So I gotta do stuff that it's almost like socially imposed. But as a child, the discomfort is I can't reach a little baby. I can't reach this ball, so it starts crying. Crying is a way of releasing the energy from discomfort and pain. What does an adult do? Oh, I'm going to pass the toy to the child. As a reaction, I don't want the child to cry. But wait a minute, the child is learning how to reach that. If you do it for them, they can't learn it. So these are the little nuances I mentioned that in the day-to-day aspect. So we would just be there. Yes, the child is crying and it will stop crying when the discomfort goes or the level has gone down, and then it will try to reach it. Eventually it will learn, right? And this is really part of a life. The discomfort is, okay, how do I adapt to this? What do I do to not have this discomfort, or the challenge, right? One of the challenges we had, Danica mentioned, was this trip to Manaus, Brazil, 5,000 kilometer trip through South America on bicycle, right? A lot of discomfort, a lot of challenge, but none of them had to do it. They wanted to do it. The thing was, you could go home anytime you want to. They didn't want to go home because from within they had the energy to do that. And that's the potential of life. We can do a lot of things in spite of challenges, being great or discomfort, right? Another question I had here at Brian is, what is the environment for secondary school teenagers, right? So the question is, what do they need? What is their inner need? We have to go, it's not us thinking they need to learn this. Yeah, in society, we have all these different things of mathematics, chemistry, language, and all of that. But if they have been grown up, if they've grew up from very young and learned to choose what to do, and the adults see we have an environment full of things with musical instruments, the more and more complex aspects, this would be the environment for them. So yeah, it is not an environment, it's not an educational system like the massification of students coming out, like out of a factory, thousands of them. If money would be supplied for that, it would be possible to do that for children, but society is not geared to that at the moment, right? My father used to say it prepares environments for cars with massive highways, massive tunnels and everything, spends billions of dollars in that. But for children, no, it's walls with little things as little as possible, right? Because the methodology is different. But if we are thinking of respecting life, not just children, the environment would be different, right? There's another higher mathematics question here. Yeah, I mean, have you heard of spiral mathematics? Right? There's a tapdana, which is a material where you actually do mathematics in a spiral way. And they do, what does a cubic root look like? The concrete materials that to do cubic root up to the millions or billions. Just play with that, because the rules are it's like a game, right? Yeah, of course, there are mathematics probably that you go into algebra and other materials that were created for all of that.
Which is the job of the adult who's accompanying. So, you know, when you see the needs, you see the activities of the children, and maybe those needs are not being met, but you see them doing certain things. So you're like, well, if the child is doing that, what can I make? What can I provide so that that need is met? Like I said, the secondary part of the pestalozzi was basically made from scratch to fit the needs of the students, what they saw that they needed. And I think that is the role, this observance and looking to see where the children are at, what they're doing. If they show an interest in origami, if they show an interest in ancient Egypt, perhaps you can also start to look at exhibitions. That was another thing. So you bring in the material and you see if that interaction is there, and if it satisfies that need, and then what springs out of that for the future for other children that are interested in it, and where does that take you, where does it go? So there's a lot of flexibility and a lot of organic process.
Yeah, there's a question here that relates to that about the mathematics materials. most of them came from the Montessori materials. But when Montessori stopped, basically, my parents, my mother, my father, they started creating other materials, like I mentioned, for example, the cubic root and other materials for mathematics that we are right now in the process of trying to go in and actually seeing what are those, because I just created them for the best, that they weren't there to be sold, they weren't there to be spread around, and we're going to make a sort of a list of all those different types of material, which are not Montessori, which are then next step up, as it were, right?
So there's a question there about for acquiring foreign languages.
Yeah.
So that just different age groups, mostly when they're already in the more formal operational, sort of 13, 14 years of age and up, because they've already acquired a lot of the language skills that are needed to be able to learn another language, I think.
Yeah, there were, for example, depending on the age group, you have materials that are basically very visual, and you have probably seen it, a bird and a bee, you'll see the bee and a lot of that. But as Danica said, my mother created a lot of language materials on different aspects on how to understand grammar, how to understand different sentence structure with a concrete material. Actually, you can see it, you can play with it, you can move it around. It's the best that was full of those different options for learning language. And they had, like Danica mentioned before, group activity where they had something called Páreme la mano, which is stop my hand. So I said, okay, is like birds, not birds, categories, and the letters starting with A, how many of animals, those kind of games that are played, or also creative writing, let's write a story and all those different things. But when children go to the socialized ages from 14 onwards, one of the big needs is to talk and the environments were there for them just to sit down and talk. We don't let children talk, and what would they talk? The things they're interested in. Or sometimes an adult who was an ex-Jesuit priest who was then now doing something as a journalist, he came in and he talked about his life, and that exposed them to other people and their professions, right? And so this was also in theater, with a professional actor who helped them with theater, and they did plays, and all those things are part of language, right? So it was very rich. You must understand this is a lot of possibilities, and because of the issue of funding, there would have been much more possible.
But there was also a lot of input from the parents themselves. So, for instance, the person who came in and did the theatre was a parent. There was a mother who came in and did choir. And so, you do need to have your bank of adult resources as well. Basically, what are the children interested in, and provide for that. There's also a question here in Spanish, but it's about how to evaluate the progress.
Speak slower for me.
Cada estudiante debe tener. Yeah, so this self-evaluation, at a certain age, a child is at a stage of development, has acquired a certain ability to be able to be more aware of their needs. They can reflect and they can say, and in the PESTA and the SEPA, the children, the older children, would say with a person who they would like to be kind of a tutor or an accompanying adult, and say, well, yes, I think that in this next period of time, I can say that I will be doing in the mathematical area, I'm going to do the cubication, I'm going to look at the different bases, I'm going to go into algebra, and I'm going to, and so it's talked about, so to maintain this human process, this very important adult role as well assisting the children by being there and listening. So by actively listening, more than actively putting in. So in that, the evaluation is it's self-evaluated, and the child can see how they're making the progress that they want to as well, the youngster, adolescent youngster.
But there was also one of the problems with legalizing the Pestalozzi school in the early days was, how do you evaluate if you have no grades? And so my parents created a whole system of evaluation, which was basically every day the teachers and then also there at the CEPAS, there's a book where they said, okay, what did the children do in the morning? And what materials did they do? And how did they do it? Did they do it autonomously? Did they do it in a concentrated way? So it's a qualitative analysis of what the activity was, how it was done with some, and those guidelines were then created into a database. So the actual evaluation of a child was an actual booklet at the end of the year of everything they had done. Not an A or a B or a C, so qualitative, right? Or a 10 or a 20. And then, like Danica said later on, they would then say, I have done this. It's not about were you successful in doing a mathematical operation? Is did you do it? How did you do it? Of course, if you did it constantly and you continue doing it, errors are not a problem. They're a way of learning. Which is then the other thing, what another question here says about technology, videos and stuff. No technological devices were really allowed, except in the place where they had to probably do something with a computer. But the technology is a virtual existence, virtual reality. Nowadays, with the pandemic and everything that happened, of course, Zoom and everything like we're doing now has become a normal way of living, right? But in this pedagogical approach, you have to have a physical approach. You can't. It's not going to be the same reading a text like we read before and grasping what's there, or even seeing a picture on a computer and actually touching it. If you see a picture of a llama, you don't know what a llama is. You have to be there, touch the thing, smell it, may spit at you, you know. And the same thing with material. So the idea is that by working with the environment, by playing with a cube that is like that's 1,000 unit, you can see the picture, you will never actually grasp it. So all these things of videos and stuff was not part of the environment, except for specific things that they wanted to. I mean, you must realize that all these tablets and stuff is something new as well nowadays, right? But it's not really something that it would be advisable for children who want to develop motor sensory skills, right?
There's a question about technology as well.
That's the one. Yeah, that's what I was trying to answer here. I mean, there is a lot to say there. I mean, we're just scraping the surface here. There's many other implications. Television, how we interact with screens, what's happening there. There's neurological effects. So my parents, what they did is they did a lot of these writings for parents of what is the effect of television on children's neurology, you know, etc. You know, so you understand that technology can be detrimental to one's biological growth, basically, right? At a later age, when you have already developed, you are, you know, at a different stage of development, you have abstraction, you already have your structures of development of mineralization created. It's a bit of a different story, right?
There's
Anything else?
about
Yeah, follow-up studies of children who have been grown up.
yeah.
In the PESTA, originally they went only up to 15, and they got a certificate that they could go at a different school. If they decided to go for over 15, it was the parents' decision, the children's decision. And then they had to find a way to go and finish an exam, to get their diploma or something like that. But what happened is that there were certain schools that would, without an entry exam, accept PESTA children, because I realized it will take me 2-3 months to adapt, and they would be the best students afterwards because they learn how to learn, right? And this is really the curriculum that is imparted in schools. Some people have said, if you would really do it with interest, you could do it in 6 months to a year, not 8 to 12 years, right? The actual understanding. Yeah. Halima wants to have a question. The sound.
Adrian.
The sound. Halima. There.
I just wanted, I was at the Pestalozzi School in 1999 as part of a research project.
Mhm.
And one of the things I noticed, I was interviewing both the kids in the secondary, and I was also interviewing the kids that had graduated or were moved on to another school. And some of the things that I noticed were really interesting. These kids had so much self-confidence. And they also, like, it was really noticeable. And also they loved school. Now in teenagers, and there was very little negativity. Now in teenagers that I have known in the United States and elsewhere, they're very negative about school and very negative about their life. This was not true of the PESTA students that I interviewed. And then, as Leonardo was saying, when they had to move to another school, they adapted very quickly and did extremely well. That was the theme that I heard over and over again.
Yeah.
And I feel like the whole point of making, what I was really touched by was this strengthening of the person, of the kid, and to be able to make decisions about their own life and their own self. That was like so key. And it was an opportunity that many of us, myself included, had missed. So I thought they were really strong in this capacity to make these inner decisions.
Yeah.
And it's something we all needed, even though I have the Latian and everything, I still struggle with making decisions. And these decisions, and not big decisions, it's not a small thing. It's like, who am I and what is it I want in my life, and will be beneficial for my life. So anyway, I just wanted to give you the feedback.
Yeah.
So I loved the school. I thought it was fantastic.
Thank you, Halima.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that it's one of the things where we've seen many of the students leave the PESTA and they've gone on. It's surprising the amount of youngsters who've gone on to do their own, they become entrepreneurs. So they're passionate about in their lives. They've maybe got to go together with a couple of their friends who are into the same thing, and they've created companies for travel, for tourism. They've created companies for publicity, for editing, for film. But others have actually gone on to study for 6-7 years to become a doctor. I know children who've become PhD students, and it really depends as well on each individual, and it depends on your family, your own parents, and what you want to do, what you're driven by, the other things that affect you as well. And from that, your own capabilities and being able to make your own way in the world. And a lot of the children that were on the trip to Manaus on bike are the ones that I've seen especially have really been able to make those incredible decisions in life. And when I was on the trip, I was in awe of the way that those youngsters were able to talk to each other in a very coherent, socialized way without diminishing or demeaning another person very often, to be able to gain the result and to find out who needs what support and how do we go ahead with this problem, what it is. And I really thought this level of communication that gets a result, that something is done, is amazing. It's something like I have not even seen in some adults. So it's
Yeah, and for example, others who have become advisors to ministers here in Ecuador, or they have gone and created world records in mountaineering. You know, you drive. You know, it's part of life. You know. Yeah.
Elaine has a question as well, but you're muted.
No, not yet.
No, I don't think so. Can you hear me?
That's
Yeah.
right now.
we can hear you.
I just wanted to say I was lucky to see the film that Leonardo made for the Manaus trip. And I remember saying at that time and thinking ever since, those kids could do anything that they set out to do in life after doing that. Just seeing the determination to accomplish an incredibly challenging trip on behalf of so many children together. And what was the age range again? Some were very young.
13 to 18. Yeah.
Yeah. And it just, to me, exemplified that taking hold of themselves and being independent, and also being a group at the same time, working together. I'm sure there were times they had to encourage each other to get through up some of those steeper passes, or through that day of the jungle when there were headhunters around. It just, I remain in awe of that accomplishment that everybody did together.
Yeah, it was an amazing experience, Elaine.
Yeah, there is, there's quite a few questions here. And one of the things is not that we don't want to answer all of them, but I said to Hadrian that we could then take some of those questions and see if we can then afterwards, if we could try to answer them in written form and then share them with you as well, right? I'm a writer, and so we could probably do some of that to continue the conversation. Many times in these Zoom calls, only a small percentage of the, at the moment, visible questions get answered. We're trying to see if we can actually answer all of them for you. So if you don't answer them now, don't worry. We'll try to do that over time, time permitting. There's a whole thing here of, there were no therapies as such in the PESTA, where you have traumas, you go through therapy and all that. My father did experiment in the early days with what they call play therapy with children, right? But then realized that therapy is adult trying to get something out of the child. The environment itself will show you your challenges, your discomforts, and by talking with others, being able to express yourself, a lot of those things get cleared up. And one of the main things here on was also when we have a deep trauma, it gets clogged up somewhere in the brain as energy, and usually that comes out through crying. Crying and laughing are the natural methods to release these things, but in society we don't let children cry. So this was one of the things at home with parents too. The child is crying, be there, accompany them, and they will get out those traumas out. They will clear them out, right? This is the natural way of doing it in a way, right? We have that within us. We're able as human beings to not repress. If society says, no, you can't do that, again, is going against the inner need to express them itself, right? So I see a question about those aspects of trauma. There's a lot of different things. My mother wrote some books, quite a few books from the experience. Only one was translated into English, which was Education for Being, which then became How to Raise Confident, Creative, something kids from
Curious, confident, creative kids.
Yeah, but I just managed to get a few months ago the rights back for the English language for my mother's books from a German publisher, and it's one of the project we have at the moment is to see how we can bring that to have it translated and see how we can publish them, and that's one of the projects we have at the moment. We feel it important to do that. My parents didn't have much of an interest in in a way with, especially the States and other places where you have other conditions with children, you know, and educational aspect. You can't touch a child in school, instead you can get sued, stuff like that. So I'm not gonna get into that. So, but I feel that as reading material and all that, we want to share some of that and do it over time. This is one of the things we have as a project as well. Now we want to see how we approach that, because translating takes time, takes money, etc., etc. And then publishing is also another issue. You know, I'm a professional author, and it's really, really difficult to do that. We're going to find a way, even if it comes to a self-publishing thing, but then we need to format it. It's different aspects, right? So I don't know if we have, what is the time like, Hadrian? Can you let us know according to your watch?
Yeah, I think about 15 more minutes. Or so.
Okay.
10, 15.
Yeah, there is a whole thing here. And I mean, we have to realize that there is three aspects. There are some questions there that we have. We're talking about the inner program of the cell, of our inner biological needs that have like a time clock where it goes clicking. Now you develop this, now you start, but it comes from within. This is nature, and this is what would be called the genetic, right? The genetic aspect. Then you have the culture aspect, called the cultural influences of society, of the whole thing of language, mathematics, music, all those different things, which are what are considered cultural. And you have the other aspect, which is nurture. How do you nurture somebody, you know? And these are all important. You can't really say that genetics is more important than, or nature is more important than the environment or the cultural. They are all interrelated. And it doesn't necessarily mean that if it's a cultural thing, it's okay. Culture, if you look at the studies of Humberto Maturana, there's a book called, in Spanish, translated to English, Amor y Juego, Los Elementos Olvidados del Humano, Love and Play, the Forgotten Elements of the Human or the Humane. He talks about the biological foundations of culture. And the culture we live in is a culture that comes from about 10 to 15,000 years ago that has started to disrespect human nature, which is not patriarchal, which is not matriarchal. It's what he called matristic. There were anthropological discoveries and archaeological discoveries of culture that actually had this thing, the big fight today, male, female, you know, all that. This is all a problem that comes from a cultural disassociation of our true nature as human beings, right? So these things are really important and interesting to understand. It's not one or the other, it's all of the above. That's important, right? If a culture says you have to go to school, doesn't mean it goes in favor of it's right, right? So these are all aspects that I find that in a lot of the questions that are being asked academically about what curriculum should we have, what should we teach, when is the right time for teaching, that basically misses the point of the nurture aspect, which is what is a nurturing environment for human beings to fulfill their human plan, their human development. If a child needs to run and scream and touch and all that at a certain age, and he must, because of the cultural expectations, sit and be quiet and shut up and everything, is being disrespected in its nature. And then you have other issues that try to adapt later on. It doesn't mean you lost a chance to develop those things, but your sensitive stage has passed. Now you got to make an effort to get back and be able to recuperate perhaps some of those things. My father used to say, my mother used to say that, well, you're still alive, you still have a chance. It's going to be hard. You have to make the decision now. It's nobody going to make it for you to change and to see something different, right? right? Yeah, I mean, there are other questions. Somebody else has another question here. A verbal question rather than a written one. Nope, I can't see here. Yeah, Ruslan, I think Hedron Ruslan wants to say something.
Okay. So my question is, I wrote it above too. It may be obvious, but I think it bears emphasis. How can one apply the wild method, the Wild method, Wild Methode to parenting?
Right.
I mean, you've implied it, but I'd like you to kind of give some specifics.
First of all, parenting, the home environment is not a school environment. It's a family environment. And in a family environment, for example, you can have environments where you, for example, for food, what would we do with at the time of eating? We had a place, Danica had a place next to her, and we were eating. The child was there. Watched us eating. It was part of the social aspect of eating, if they were awake, of course, at the time. We didn't wake them up to come and eat. Then is a thing, for example, when they were the whole Emmy Pickler methodology as well for earlier, from 0 to 3, where you wait for a child when you change their clothes, not just put the clothes on. That's the purpose the adult has, but for the child, it's an experience. So to give the child, say, okay, we're taking your right arm now, verbalizing, you take your left arm now. Now we're gonna do it all in a respectful way, and not in a speedy way, but more at their rhythm, right? Similar with bathing. And then outside we had, like in the school, we had a place for them to play with sand, the sand pit. We were lucky to have the space to do that. And basically this realizing what are their needs, and in the bedroom, the different toys for different ages, what is the child trying to or needs to do at the moment, motor, sensory, and affectively. Yeah, I don't know if you want to say something there too.
Yeah, I mean, I think also for us, the Pesta was 4 hours per morning. That's 5 days a week. So the rest of the time you're in your home environment. So that was another thing in the Pesta. There were a lot of meetings with the parents to discuss and try to assist in their own, the things that they were unsure about or that caused them some concern with their own ways of behaving with their children, or grandparents behaving with children as well. So when you develop or this sort of culture within your family, which I mean, we probably have this respectful environment in our houses, but it's also about the needs of the family. So if we agree that we're all going to eat at a certain time, because that's a need, we prepare the food, we eat at the same time, it's still hot, then that the parents are a reference, the adult is a reference for the child in the day, in their environment and in the home. So it's about also helping, by making sure that your environment is orderly, but it's about saying that I do it. So I put this back, this is where this lives. And if it's consistent and it's coherent and it's always there, then it's part of the child's experience of life, and that's how it will become. And about, talking to the children themselves, it's listening, a lot of listening, and trying to feel what's behind certain things that the children are saying, because at certain ages, children can't really verbalize sufficiently their inner feeling, what's really going on for them, that it will come out as something else, or their particular behavior might be, well, what's happening here? You don't have a reason for it, but trying to find out what it is by listening, and just this way of talking to children, which is really to get the right, communication, and also to be as authentic as you can. One of the things in the besta was that some of the children would say to their parents, don't talk like the teachers in the besta, or don't do some of the things that the teachers do in the besta towards us. You're our parents, you're not our teachers, who, there was a certain way that the teachers would be with the children. They had a certain way of speaking that was to verbalize more and more, but when it's authentically coming from you, it feels good for the child as with your parent. But when it's something that you're speaking out, which comes from somewhere else, children kind of identify that quickly, and it doesn't feel right. So it becomes a discomfort to them. So it can cause other problems.
It becomes a technique. And one quick thing there is, again, try not to be directive, not to tell them what to do.
Yeah,
this is basic. When you do that principle, you're respecting them in many ways that most people are not. Not do things for them. Oh, you can't do it. I'm sorry. You're so no. Just if you have to give them a hand, if they ask for it, you can do that as a parent. But it's not something. Oh, I'm going to pass this to you now. Like as depending on the age group, of course. This is really all dependent on what the age group is. This is really critical. It's not a one rule applies to everything. It's what age are they in? Right now we have ours are 18, 20, and 22. It's a different story than when they were 3, 4, and no. Yeah.
A lot more conversations going on. Yeah.
Might have time for one more question, and then we'll save the rest.
Somebody else? Russell wanted, or somebody else? Yeah. Brienne.
She's muted.
It's muted. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Yes, I'm pretty touched by what you said about families, and as a teacher, I'm an English teacher in a secondary school. What I can see is that whatever we put into action at school, if in the family it's very different, we do observe that our impact is not, that high. Whereas when we can have like a parent school, and we can also develop parents' abilities, then the impact we try to have at school is much, much deeper. And you used the word I really appreciated, which was consistency. And I think that this notion of consistency, not only in what we do at school or in what we do as parents, but the consistency between families and schools, despite the fact that it's not exactly the same, of course, but it's really important. And I wanted to know, what do you think about developing like nonviolent communication within families as a tool to support family relationships?
Yeah, well, violent communication is what comes from semi-socialized communication stages, where people have not been able to develop the sense of, because of their upbringing, the sense of when somebody says something which I don't agree with, it's not an attack against me, basically. And yeah, one of the things that my mother was really keen with parents too is, do you really want to talk to yourself in your family like that and create is a non-respectful way? A violent communication is a disrespectful communication. So if you want to respect, you don't even consider being violent if you can, right? Of course, then teenagers, others, they come and there's always some situation where you have this struggle, but then the idea is, how can you realize what caused that communication and then choose, I don't want to react in a way. Usually a violent communication comes from, you need two people to argue, as they say, So if one says something, then do you want to react to something, or do you want to step back and calm down? one of the things that I have been researching as well is the whole thing of when do we enter this fight, flight, or freeze syndrome from the limbic brain, which is a survival mode for mammalians and for human beings too in situations of stress and danger. So basically, when we react in that way is because something called the reticular activating system has shut down the cortex, and we can't talk intelligently. We're gonna be fighters, or you know. And so when I see that, it happens to me. When I see that, when Danica says, or my son says something like that, and I want to go and beat the crap out of them, as it were, because that's the feeling you have inside. Oh, you thought no. You say, no, I am not in a mode, in a situation right now, in a place, as it were. Actually, my RAS is activated, my cortex is shut down. I won't be able to talk intelligently. So I better move away until that switches off. This happens with writer's block. When people can't write, it's because that has activated itself. This is a natural, it's not bad, but this is the result. You want to choose to go that way, or basically learn to act, as they call it, rationally rather than just purely emotionally, right? And to understand the neurology behind that. I mean, the neurology of human beings is very complex. When we understand the neurology, when we understand this, what is respect of life processes, a lot of these techniques and questions would have an answer, an automatic answer. If we don't understand, we try to create a technique around it, what they call nonviolent communication and stuff. These are all adaptations to not understanding what is happening with us. And create a thing, okay, separate or use this technique to come out of it. But really, if you understand yourself, which most people don't, you know, we're still trying to understand how we work. But this is, for us, was really, for my parents, was really important to understand the neurobiology of learning, of growth, that's what we are as a human being. Yeah, there's a spiritual aspect, we have the Ladi hand, but that doesn't replace not understanding the biology of what we are, who we are.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. I would like to end this meeting with a moment of quiet, but before we do that, I just want to extend thanks to Leonardo and Danica for giving this talk to us and creating this space for us to be able to communicate with one another. I personally feel very inspired. I really appreciate the fact that this isn't just theory, this has already happened. There's evidence in the students that have gone through these programs, and hearing the beautiful things about what they have grown into through these experiences has been really inspiring for me. And I hope that we can have more of these kind of conversations, and we can build more things like this in the world for our children, because the world needs it. So before our moment of quiet, I would love for us to please, if you can just unmute yourself and give a round of applause, that would be nice. It's really quiet in Zoom.
Thank you.
Thank you to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So much.
Thank you so much.
Well, thanks very much for giving us the space. And it's been really interesting to hear all the questions as well. There's a lot of food for thought and lots to go on with.
Yeah, thank you. And again, I mean, perhaps this is just like an introduction, as I say, just scratching the surface. There's so much more behind that. We're trying to see how we can help expand this, right? But I mean, as you heard, I'm dealing with 2 companies. I'm also writing, so taking time to do things as, you know, we have to see how we do that. But these kind of spaces, I feel, thank you, Adrian, for setting it all up, and for everybody else to be here, right? Without you, we're just talking among ourselves, of course. And but if you have any specific things you would like to know, perhaps we could do something that is more like pointed to specific topics. There's so much to talk about.
Thank you.
And thank you to Miranda for
translating,
for interpreting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Miranda. Much
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Judy, in New Zealand.
God
You're up in
bless,
the middle of the
my dear.
night.
It
Let
was
Judy
lovely
give.
to hear you. Okay, bye now.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Quiet, yeah.
Bye-bye.
We'll take care.
Bye, Brianna.
Robin Reese is there from.
Here we go.
Shall I leave?
I'm gonna stay on.
Yeah.
If you'd like
I will
to.
call you, Leonardo, Danica.
Hi, Robin. I saw your name there. Was it really you?
I was busy with the children in between. I will call you. I wanted to call you anyway.
Sure.
Call you someday. Okay. Take care.
Okay, you too.
Take care. Thank you very much, everybody.
Do you think he?
Okay. I'm trying to figure out how to do
Okay.
this. I think I might go ahead and end the call, and people, if they want to sit quietly, I'm going to say a prayer to myself that I hope this experience can be integrated into my life. If you would like to do that, that's fine. I'll leave mine on if you say, if you'd like to leave the call or say goodbye.
Right, great, thank you.
Right, we'll stay on for a moment.
Yeah.
All right. God bless all.
Thanks, Adrian.
Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you so much.
So we will see by sending you that page with the name of the books for those who are interested and a link. And yeah, see what's needed from here. Just let us know. And yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, if you can
and the questions
chat.
and the questions so we can see how we can perhaps take some time to see if we can answer those or not.
Yeah, we'll be in touch. We've got a few things to send back and forth for a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Super.
Okay.
Well, thanks again, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye. I'll see you.
Thanks.